الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم أما بعد. فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير حج محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. كيف حالكم جميعا يا أيها الإخوة والأخوات. والحمد لله, by the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala. I know that it's early, but for many of us, our day pretty much normally gets started for the Muslimun at Salat al-Fajr, but a lot of us, alhamdulillah, due to the COVID-19, a lot of our job schedules have been turned around. But inshallah ta'ala, I would like to, by the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala, pay a little bit respect to the past and show some type of appreciation for those who have preceded us. As this is found in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, that the past hold what we call lessons, valuable lessons that we can learn from, and that those who precede us during those trials, during those times, and who actually help establish certain things for us to have and to learn from, inshallah ta'ala. So that's what this talk will be about today. I would like to start with the statement of Al-Haji Malik ibn Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X, formerly known as, his birth name is Malcolm Little. This is a statement that is reported that he have said, "I do not pretend to be a divine man, but I do believe in divine guidance, divine power, and in the fulfillment of divine prophecy. I am not educated, nor am I an expert in any particular field, but I am sincere, and my sincerity is my credentials." I wanted to start off with that statement first and foremost as a disclaimer, and as something, as an insight that Allahu Jalla wa Ala, He tells Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam over and over in His beautiful book, which He has sent to all of mankind, about the importance of fa'budullaha mukhlisan lahu dini, and that He also told Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam at other times, say to the people, fa'budullaha, say that I worship the one, meaning I worship Allah Jalla wa Ala, and I make my deen sincerely for Him alone. So the concept of sincerity and the concept of devoting yourself to Allah Jalla wa Ala is the only thing that you really need. So this statement of Malcolm here really touched me, because that's the real criteria, that's the real credentials that any individual need, is sincerity, coupled with ilm nonetheless, but he needs sincerity. And that sincerity should be that measuring stick that Allah Jalla wa Ala is going to use based on accepting a person's actions according to that of the Sunnah. So we chose to title this particular talk, by the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala, from the mouths of our black scholars, on the plight of the indigenous people here in the West. Alhamdulillah. This is an article that was placed together by Dorothy E. Roberts, okay? I want y'all to pay attention she cite all of the reference, but it's small. It's not even long. But I want you to hear the understanding of those scholars who have tackled and dealt with the indigenous plight here in America, who have dealt with the Constitution of America, who have dealt with the understanding of that Constitution. So the name of this particular article that we're going to be coming from, that echo their concerns and their beliefs and their thoughts and what they take from this particular system that we are faced with, is the meaning of blacks' fidelity to the Constitution. Fidelity here brings the concept of a loyal person, loyalty to the fault. In other words, this person is so loyal to this cause, or loyal to a belief, loyalty to a person. In this case, we're talking about the Constitution. All right? So that we know, the George Floyd situation, COVID-19, all of these different things, for some of us, this is new. Some of us haven't experienced something like this. And this might be a little bit unprecedented for some of us. For those of our elders and those who are older than us, who have lived during the time what they call the civil rights movement, or have lived during certain times and have experienced racism up front, or prejudice or bias up front, then they understand some of these things. But for the youth, many of us don't, we haven't probably experienced some of these things, face to face, and seeing it in reality, in real time, right? So with the outcry of America, with the outcry of the youth in America, the outcry of the indigenous people in America, the black people in America, their frustration, and rightly so, the injustice, the oppression, I wanted to highlight some key points within this article. And I hope, please, do not misconstrue my words. I am a passionate speaker. I get emotional at times. For those who follow me, those who know, that's what I do. Alhamdulillah, may Allah Jalla make me better than that. And if it's a character flaw, may Allah remove it. But I am sincere in my approach to try to explain, inshallah ta'ala, some definitive guidelines, some definitive outlooks that we can use moving forward. Okay? And we can't move forward without going to the past, without going back and looking at those scholars, okay, from our people who have dealt with the indigenous plight here in the West, who have dealt with this systemic racism, who have dealt with institutionalized racism, who have dealt with all of these different things. All right? We have to respect them at a level. We have to respect them. So I'm going to go back and listen to them. What the fidelity to the Constitution does to us depends on our experience of constitutional evil. In agreements with hell and other objects of our faith. Professor Balkin observes that within our legal culture, the idea of fidelity to the Constitution is seen as pretty much as an unquestioned good. All right? Now, the Constitution has been established by the Founding Fathers. All right? Whether or not blacks are included within the Founding Fathers, we're going to see what our scholars is going to say. All right, this is the whole purpose for this art. All right, he says, for many Americans, however, the constitutional fidelity is not at all an indisputable preconditions. In the case of black Americans, it is much more appropriate to begin with the question, why should they be faithful to the Constitution? Why should they? All right. How could black people possibly pledge allegiance to a constitution that defined them as less than human? Was structured to enslave them and has been interpreted time and time again to keep them subjugated to whites. In light of all of the indignity showered upon blacks under the color of the Constitution, I would think the presumption would be that blacks should repudiate the document and all of the injustice for which has stood for. All right. So the Constitution, brothers and sisters, as we're going to see, the argument with one of our leaders who fought with the civil rights movement and so forth was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And you can see with the Black Panthers as well, the utilizing of the Constitution. But from what angle did they utilize it? Did they utilize the Constitution in support of and fealty to it, or to hold up the racist regime that they were dealing with to the laws that the founding fathers actually came up with, and that hold them to the higher standards? Which approach were they using? So this is pretty much what Balkans is trying to elaborate and point out to us. Why will a people who have not benefited from the Constitution whatsoever, who have been enslaved by that very Constitution, meaning the interpretation of it has been subjected and subjugated to be less than human and inferior to whites, why would they swear a fealty to it? Why would they have fidelity towards this? Where Balkans ends up unsettling the notion of constitutional faith as an unquestioned virtue is precisely where Black Americans begin. Having been treated as outsiders all along, blacks confront the Constitution with an unavoidable option of accepting or rejecting it. Surprisingly, many prominent black thinkers, even the most radical ones, not only have failed to reject the Constitution, but have made it a highlight of their advocacy. Black activists from Martin Luther King Jr. to Black Panthers have framed their demands in terms of constitutional rights. While King repeatedly insisted that the segregation violated the Constitution, Huey Newton claimed that this constitutional right to bear arms. This response explores the meaning of blacks' astonishing fidelity to the Constitution. So they're going to point out a picture here that you have to understand the argument here. Martin Luther King at that time when he was fighting for civil rights, and I know a lot of people always say that protesting, and they use this as one of their strongest arguments, the benefits of protesting, the benefits of these demonstrations can be seen in the bills that were passed from civil rights. The fact that we are now no longer segregated. We actually achieved desegregation. But have we really achieved that? And is that understood unanimously with all of our black scholars? And is that something that we are sitting in a seat of privilege right now? All of us right now are sitting in a seat of privilege. Why? Because we're sitting in a seat of luxury of witnessing the results of these, because we weren't present during these arguments. A lot of us wasn't present during these fights and these struggles. But we are here now witnessing the outcome and the result of those struggles. And we're seeing the result of the civil rights movement and the bills that were passed. That are they beneficial or are they not beneficial? We're seeing the outcome of it. So in regards to that, when you look at it, King was saying, okay, we need to be included. In order for us to have equality, that's the issue. In order for blacks to be seen equal with whites, then they have to embrace the Constitution. And in order to embrace the Constitution, they must be included within the Constitution in order to address the issue of equality. This is what Martin Luther King was saying. And most of the national mainstream Negro leaders at that time was pushing this agenda. Okay? Not Malcolm. And not James Baldwin. And not others. They weren't pushing that agenda. But nonetheless, Martin had he had understanding, was rightly so, that he's thinking that this is what it's going to do. All right? So Dr. King, what he did was he approached the Constitution not because of fidelity, but because he wanted equality for his people. All right? Is that bad? Is that wrong? Now, Huey Newton did not approach the Constitution because of fidelity and being sworn to it. He approached it from the standpoint, the Black Panthers, is that this is the law that this is the law that your founders came up with. This is the law that you abide by. Then I'm going to make you stick to it. Sort of like Allah Jalla wa'ala tell us to tell the people of the book to stick to their books. To stick to why didn't they judge according to their books in Surah Ma'idah. Allah Jalla wa'ala tells him, so if you're a truther, then why didn't you stick to your books? Why did you alternate it? Why did you change it? Why didn't you stick to what your prophets call? So Huey Newton is saying, okay, I got the right to bear arms according to your founding fathers. This is your constitution. Not because he believed that the constitution include the indigenous people. That's not what Huey Newton's fight was. And that's what she's going to bring out in this article. She said that this response explores the meaning of black astonishing fidelity to the Constitution. 1. The purpose of the constitutional fidelity. In each historical period, black Americans have been faithful to the Constitution that looked very different from the version espoused by the contemporary courts. It is a constitution that abolished slavery prior to the Civil War, that provided free slaves with 40 acres and a mule during Reconstruction, that invalidates separate but equal equal faculties or facilities. F1. Yeah, equal facilities prior to Brown versus Board of Education, and that continues to mandate a radical dismantling of discriminatory structures despite the Supreme Court's adherence to the doctrine of colorblindness. Surely black people are the main practitioners of what Balkans calls ideal constitutionalism, which solves the problem of fidelity to an unjust constitution by conforming to the object of the interpretation to our sense of what is just. Now, Balkan is arguing that how can a people who continuously be subjugated, enslaved, who haven't benefited, who haven't got the privilege, who have not gained the equality or the recognition, be so dedicated and so sworn and so loyalty to this Constitution? Balkans was trying to say, how can this possibly happen? And he was later on he's going to describe how astonishing it is. And this is what Claude Anderson, right now, Dr. Claude Anderson is arguing the point that many of the whites, they view the indigenous people, the black people, to be weak for multiple reasons why they don't respect them. And one of the reasons why they don't respect them is because they never fought back. They are the most forgiving people on earth. They never fought their oppressors back. I mean, it was small pockets, because we can argue against what Dr. Claude Anderson is saying here. There always been small rebellions, and always been people fighting back in certain ways. Just because we didn't fight back with guns, and sometimes we did, and sometimes with knives, sometimes we fought back with our words, sometimes with our speech. It's different types of ways of fighting back. Other people can argue against what Dr. Claude Anderson was saying. But in terms of this concept of submitting to your oppressor and just riding out with it, Balkans was kind of like perplexed. He was like, I can't see how these people can actually submit to something like that. How can they have this fealty to something or this fidelity to something that doesn't really benefits them? She goes on to say that no self-respecting person could commit to a covenant that denies her humanity. But why have most blacks not rejected the Constitution altogether? I think the answer is that fidelity to the Constitution offers practical advantages to black people who struggle for full citizenship. That's the crux. This is what Dorothy is trying to say. Because Martin Luther King was arguing for full equality, Malcolm was arguing the same thing for full equality, but he didn't think that going by the Constitution would be the way. Okay, he did cite the Constitution, but he didn't think that would be the way. James Baldwin, the likes, and others, as we're going to see, did not think that was the way. All right. However, in order to get equality, you have to play with the Constitution. We got to be recognized. This is what Martin fought for the most. The goal of equal citizenship is the heart of black Americans' fidelity to the Constitution. That's the crux. The only reason why you will see them even playing with the Constitution is because we're talking about equality. We want to be looked at and seen as equal people. Our God-given right, which equality is a God-given right. It's no right of any class or group or ethnicity people to come along and tell you whether or not you are to be treated less or to be treated more. It's none. No one in any social system can actually tell you that they are the dominant and you are the inferior. All right? But this happens because we know that, wars takes out, people become subservient, people become subjected. We know that, the evil hearts of men and so forth. But in regard, it is a God-given right that each person, all right, is equal in a certain sense as far as equality. It's a God-given right. All right? Now there are institutions as far as slavery, free slave, and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into that pretty much outside of what the slavery here in America or the West, how it looked. He says here, she continues, she says, Black people first commitment to establishing their inclusion in the American policy, or the American policy and the fidelity to the Constitution is a way of achieving that objective. Under this instrumental approach, equal citizenship does not arise from Constitution. It precedes it. The Constitution is not the standard of justice we should faithfully uphold. Equal citizenship is. We know how to be just not by immersing ourselves in the Constitution's language, but by imagining what it would mean for Black people to be treated like human beings. The purpose of constitutional fidelity is to insist that constitutional interpretations abide by this higher standard of justice. In short, fidelity is a means, not an end, and it is a means to an end, and is more fundamental than the Constitution. So she's arguing to the fact that our allegiance to this Constitution should not be there. All right? Blacks then are not faithful to the Constitution because the Constitution deserves their allegiance, for it deserves their cynicism. I mean, they need to be cynical of it, right? Their cynicism. If not, their contempt. They are faithful to the Constitution because Black people deserve to be included in the constitutional protections and promises. Black fidelity to the Constitution is not a duty. It is a demand to be counted as full members of the political community. The Black nationalists, and I want to take time, brothers and sisters, please, man, I'm talking about Muslims now, and even the indigenous people, but I'm talking about Muslims. We gotta uphold Malik Shabazz even harder than what we're doing, man. We gotta uphold him. We really do, because not only that, Allah Jalla wa Ala allowed him to accept Islam and the correct version of Islam, but he plays a significant role in the spread of Islam, even if it came in the form of the Nation of Islam with Elijah Muhammad and that movement. Even though it was Muslims here prior till that movement, but they weren't vocal and it wasn't known on that scale. So they did have a contribution for Islam spreading by the will of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So just on that bab alone, he plays a significant role in that. Then the fact that Allah Jalla wa Ala allowed him to accept and get the correct version of Islam, he plays a significant role in that. And then on the fact that he fought and championed against the oppressed, which Islam encourages us. Throughout the Quran, Allah speaks against injustice. Allah speaks for people standing up against injustice, against yourself and so forth. This is something that every Muslim should know and understand, that you not stand for injustice under no circumstances. This doesn't mean you protest. I know people got a problem with me with that. I don't care. I heard the arguments of all of these students, and the one thing they keep avoiding to mention is give me the scholar that say that protesting is permissible, and give me that proof, and give me that evidence that is weighing towards the truth. Because we don't have nothing that shows us that it is. But there are legal ways we can go about things to actually get something done. And that's why I want to go back and look at our scholars and look at some of the things they did besides just protesting. Some of the arguments, some of the plans, the definitive plans they had laid out to actually fight what was the injustice here in the West. They use different means. It's not always demonstrations. Not every Black thinker, not every Black leader was for the demonstrations. Not all of them were for demonstrations. They didn't consider that was a way of really getting something done. You should see. You should see. Really do some real research. You should see that not all of them was in agreement with that. He said they are faithful to the Constitution because it goes to mention here that, and we're going to say the Black nationalist Malcolm X. So you see how she referred to Malcolm? So you see how she refers to Malcolm X? Right? We'll use the bathroom. You see how she refers to him as a nationalist. If you go right now on the internet and Google, you're going to see that they had mainline Malcolm X in the media. They had portrayed Malcolm to be this radical individual, right? That is he's always misquoted, misunderstood, mistreated amongst the media as someone who was provocative, someone who was militant, someone who was, you know what I'm saying, a advocacy of violence. This is how they portray him because the media got that type of power to make you think that. But it's far from what he really was. And it's far from what he really preached. And it's far from what he stood for. Yes, he had a time where he did preach a little bit hatred It was a time that he went through that, the evolution, the different stages that he went through. Everyone know that. That's, I mean, it's recorded, it's documented. But then there was a time when he didn't speak like that. And it was a time that he actually stood against what he was speaking to before. But it seemed like they failed to really highlight that point. And I think that we as Muslims should uphold him. We don't have to make indirect statements that are seen to be disrespectful to him, his person, to his study of Islam, and even to his legacy. When you hear people talking about he didn't graduate from any university, Islamic university, you might say, well, that's a factual statement, right? He didn't get a chance to sit with any scholars. You might say, well, that's a factual statement. You might not find nothing wrong with that. But I do. That's a problematic statement. It's unnecessary. There's no need for you to even mention that. Because really, if you really go back, everything points opposite of that. Because Saudi Arabia, the Mamlaka, when he went there, he left with somebody they sent back with him from a scholar to educate him about Islam, right? Not only that, from Malcolm actually biography, he was someone who was a study of, he was, because education, brothers and sisters, is not school. You go to a school and they give you a set of rules. If that's not education, education really means self-taught. A lot of people don't really understand that. It means you educate yourself. Do you understand that? That's normally what you normally do. And he actually was a person that he studied, he researched, he reformed, he did that. So he was always a seeker of some type of knowledge. And when Islam got a hold of it, which makes you think he stopped seeking knowledge because he got into Islam? No, he continued to seek knowledge even when he was in Islam. And he vocalized, and he was a very vocal man, that he made it vocal that this is what I am. And the whole world knew that he was Muslim. And he never actually shied away from that. He never shied away from the fact that he was Muslim. And that, you know, and that this is what he was and this is what he professed to be. So when someone from amongst us come up and say he didn't graduate from the university, what do you intend by that? When someone say that he didn't sit with the scholars, what are you trying to say? You know what I mean? He's Muslim. You don't deny that fact, right? What are you trying to say? You're trying to say that he's, what? He got to be a scholar in order to be to vocalize what he's saying? To actually stand up against oppression? That's what you're saying? Do we have to sit at the foot of the scholars? No. I don't mean that. Brothers and sisters, we got to be careful, man. Because in this day of time, I think a lot of people are forgetting, just because you come out of a university, just because you come out of any setting of educational background, doesn't mean you understand how to deal or tackle with the plights of the people here in the West, or even anywhere, right? It's not about your degree at the end of the day. The degree is significant. It plays a role. We already talked about this many times. No one's going to disrespect degrees. It plays a role, but in what field? In work field. That's what it plays a role in. Do you not know that? It plays a role in that. It plays a role really about you getting hired in work field. But when you make your academic achievements and advancement, it's going to show in the transformation and the contribution that you have played in society. What did you contribute to economically? What did you contribute socially? What did you contribute politically? What did you contribute to your people? What did you do? So you got this academia with you, but what dent did you put into the society? How do we know that you benefit from the knowledge that you got? Or do you just have a certificate? Which one is it? You understand? How active are you with that knowledge that you have? What is you standing for? We need to see that. The results of your information, your ilm. That's what we need to see. Not your certificate. I want to see the results. I don't want to see your certificate. I can care less about your certificate. Because your certificate doesn't make you stand in front of Allah whether or not you were sincere or not in acquiring it. Allah not worrying about your certificate. He's worrying about your sincerity and you're sticking to and adhering to His laws. Huh? Hold on. I love you too. Right? So they're not worried about that. You understand? That's not what Allah Jalla wa'ala is worrying about. He's worrying about you really coming back and contributing with the information that He gives you. Islam is to make things better. Allah sent down Islam to govern us. Do you know that? To govern life, to interact. It deals with 5 things that it preserves. If you're not utilizing that Islam in the society that you live in, with your neighbors, with your friends, with your society, with your community, if you're not utilizing those things, then how can I say you have any knowledge? I can say you have information, but how can I say that you are something? I don't know where your potential is yet. I haven't seen where you have put a dent at in your academics. So for me, I'm not hooked up off on degrees. Here is a man and multiple men, because one of the distinguishing factors of the indigenous people in America, they don't choose their leaders, by the way. This is one of the things that was an observation that were made as far as the indigenous people of America. They don't choose their leaders. Malcolm X wasn't chosen by the people to be their leader. I hope you know that, right? Martin Luther King wasn't chosen by the people, but because they were advocate, because they motivated and they inspired, because they stood up against injustice because it demands that, and because they took on that mantle and they were good at it, understand? Then people started recognizing the contribution that they were making and upholding for the masses and of the people, so they started to rally behind them. Do you not understand that? So you got knowledge, but you're sitting somewhere I can't understand. You study for this amount of years, but I can't understand where your contribution is at. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm not taking shots at nobody. I'm just trying to get you to understand, put everything in its proper place and its perspective. Do you understand? Put everything in its proper place. You know what I mean? That's what I'm just trying to say. So here, when she breaks this down, she's saying that, look what Malcolm had. He says, Malcolm X refused to petition to whites for the recognition of black civil rights, relying instead on the more fundamental notion of human rights. And this is more closer to Islam, not because it's Malcolm. I'm not saying this, I'm not being biased. But it is more closer than right to with Islam. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala has created man and woman, right? With what we call, there are certain rights that are given to men and certain rights are given to women, but they both are slaves of Allah, which is equal in the sense that they are both from Allah Azza wa Jal. So this equality that Allah Jalla wa Ala has given is a God-given right. Allah Jalla wa Ala makes it clear, Ya ayyuhan nas inni khalaqnakum min dhakarin wal untha. All right, Allah Jalla wa Ala made men and women, but He have gave set of rights to each one. But it still doesn't give the right of someone to say, okay, I'm gonna make you inferior now. No. So Malcolm is saying that instead of you going to Constitution, instead of you going to your oppressors, instead of you telling them that, listen, you arguing with them to give you a civil rights. This is what people don't realize. You argue for someone to give you equality when that's a God-given. It's a sovereignty law. Your God-given rights, you have equality. They didn't have to argue with nobody to be equal. The people that they did argue with to gain independence, they fought them. That was the British. But they didn't have to argue with nobody to say, oh, I'm going to be equal. They made themselves the dominant race. You not understand that? So when they did that, I'm not talking about all white people. Please, don't misconstrue my words. I'm not talking about all white people. All right? We're talking about those who have built and those who continue to benefit in some way, whether directly or indirectly, off of the systemic racism and the institutionalized racism that has continued to be here for years, that has not shown any signs that it's going anywhere anytime soon. And every outcry, if you go back to 1967, you go back, even you can go back further than that, but 1967, the long hot summer of 1967, go back to 1992, all right? Go back to any of these different types of protests that led to riots. I mean, outrage because justice wasn't served. And look what happened. They burnt down the city and everything like that. But what really happened? People argue and say, well, yes, the protesting did lead to something during Martin Luther King. Look what we got. We got integration. But was integration the best move for us? As I say, as we're going to finish this article, you're going to see some people don't agree with that. That wasn't the best. That might not have been the best move for us. Was that the best move? Or wasn't it? I mean, some people might argue against it. So it don't mean it was the best move. And plus, the legislation for the Civil Rights Bill was not even passed during the time Martin Luther King was alive. It wasn't even passed right immediately after his death. It took at least a year or two to three for it to get passed. And just because it got passed, it still got mainlined to the side because of something else that happened, which they had called their attention to deal with that, which the civil rights actually has pretty much sit on the shelf. So when you're looking at your oppressors and they telling you, I'm going to pass a bill for you, why do I have to pass a bill for you for law, equality, equal employment, and all this stuff when I took it from you? Why I had to give you that? The fact that you are coming to me and begging me for that show me how subservient you are to me. So why would I give you something? This is one of the things we got to really think about. Okay, so this is one of the things we got to think about. So at the same time, Malcolm X was, because she's trying to point this point out. This is what she's trying to say. Human rights are your God-given rights. Human rights are the rights that are recognized by all nations on this earth. At the same time, Malcolm X was the consummate pragmatist, advocating that blacks attempt to win their freedom by any means necessary. When asked about his attitude towards civil rights organizations, he responded, "I'm for whatever get results." I guess that was a little bit how she threw that out there at the end of the day, showing you how sometimes that Malcolm X will use the Constitution, or will, as later on she's going to mention that he did, like Huey Newton, use the Constitution, but it wasn't out of fidelity for the Constitution. Like Huey Newton didn't do it out of fidelity for the Constitution. It was to uphold the people to something that they recognize and that they have set as laws from their founders, their founding fathers. So won't you hold up to it and won't you abide by it? That's pretty much what they were doing. Okay, according to your law, this says that we got a right to bear arms. This says we got a right to do this. So I'm going to do that according to your law. Now you can't say nothing about it because this is your law, and you claiming that the Constitution isn't racist, and you claiming that the Constitution is not pro-slavery, and you claiming that the Constitution is not this, then you shouldn't have a problem with me bearing these arms because I have a right to do so, right? So that's pretty much how the argument became with, you know, the Black Panthers and so forth. So he says, she continues, she said, the source of blacks' fidelity to the Constitution is not to be found in the Constitution itself. It comes from the faith that the Constitution will one day be interpreted to include blacks as full citizens. This faith derives from the belief in oppressed people's determination to be free. It is the faith embodied in the civil rights movement's conviction that we shall overcome. Slave songs vow that victory unrealized on earth would surely be achieved in the heaven. This instrumental fidelity to the Constitution is the reason for black critical race scholars' disagreements with white critical legal studies scholars over the significance of rights. Scholars such as Crenshaw, Anthony Cook, Patricia Williams have argued that the critics' rejection of rights discounts the importance of rights to black struggle for equal citizenship. Critical legal studies theories rejected right discourse in part because of a stereotyping of human experience. But Patricia Williams argued that this is a lesser historical evil than having been ignored altogether. The black experience, she quotes, of anonymity, the estrangement of being without a name, has been one of the living in the oblivion of a society's inverse, beyond the dimension of any consideration at all. So I want to say to you people, alhamdulillah, to our brothers and sisters from other nationalities and that are benefiting when you come here to the West. I want you to understand something that you're benefiting from. You benefit from a systemic racism, institutionalized system. You are not on equal footing with the native blacks here in the West. You're not. Under no circumstances, and I believe a lot of you know that. You are afforded opportunities, you are afforded privileges from this system and this system over the native blacks who helped build this actual country. You are. You understand? That's because you are people who have a country. You are people who have a state. You are people who have some type of benefit or whatever, or even people that that America recognizes. So they give you some type of citizenship and they give you some type of privilege based off of those connections that they want to have with other countries. So they afford you those opportunities, also on top of indirectly keeping down the native blacks here in the West. So they make you get better than that. And this is proven. You can look and search it right now. It's proven that the average nationalities that makes way more than the blacks. Actually, if you look at it, there is no black community. There are black neighborhoods. It's not a community. It's different from a community. There are black neighborhoods. Don't get it wrong. There are indigenous neighborhoods, but there's no community. It's not one black community that exists in America. Not one. It's neighborhoods that exist, small pockets here, there, but it's not. But there are communities of different nationalities in America. But those nationalities didn't build this country. Those nationalities didn't fight for this country. Those nationalities didn't stand with this country time and time again against its enemies, against its foes. They did not. So when you speak and say, I understand, or you sympathize or try to sympathize with the plight of the native black in America, you can't. But you can offer dua for them. And what you can start doing, if you really want to start doing, is look at the privileges that they give you and don't misconstrue or have a bad negative view or a negative view of a native black here in the West because of some stereotypes, because that's what the system want you to think. Oh, I can't work with my black folks. They always begging. Their hands always out. They always lazy. They always this. And we know what we do, how we are. shut our doors. I'm not going to marry my daughter off to him. I'm not going to sit with him. I can't, they never want time. They never this, that. All of these stereotypes that we have based off of what they projected of us. But we have been traumatized. Literally, we have been traumatized. Whether you want to believe it or not, we have been traumatized. You try, watch what you see in this article. You try to explain over and over why you can never become equal, why you can never get your rights. Over and over, watching people get killed, people that you love, watching people get raped, watching people get plummeted, watch individuals build things up and get them taken away from them, seized, destroyed. You try over and over, and it seems like a nightmare that will never end. Over and over. Every time you get a little short leave, a short moment of reprieve, it comes right back again, and it starts over and over again. You see what that does to you psychologically. You see what it does. You want to talk about cognitive dissonance? You see what it does. You understand? It's real. On any level, it's real. And it's not to not look at the fact that it is oppression in other countries. Not to say that. And other countries do have their struggles and their wars with different people and different things that they go through that with their government or whatever, that their rights are being trampled upon. This is not to negate that. But when you want to speak on the level of a native black here in this country, you really have to understand you haven't been through what they've been through. You haven't been through what they've been through. And you're not treated the same way that they're treated. Not even in a remote, close way, you're not. Yes, you do get a share of racism for our Arab brothers, for our Pakistanis, for our different people. You do. Sometimes because when you got white, patriotic, racist people, they tend to bunch, they say what they want to say. They tend to bunch you up and say you're nothing but terrorist, or you saying nigger, or you this or you that. You do get that. Yes, and it is experienced across the board because a lot of people, a lot of Muslims right now, we're so emotional, man. And a lot of blacks, rightly so. We're so emotional. We want everybody to speak about everything. So everybody worrying about what about the bigotry? What about the races that Arabs have displayed on blacks? What about the races that this country displayed on blacks? I mean, honestly, think about it. So if I sit here and just talk to you about racism existing or prejudice or bias, which is from an aspect of Jahiliyyah, that the Prophet ﷺ dealt with even back then with Abu Darda, if I keep talking about that with the other nationalities having that against us, and what's that's going to do? Is that's going to shed light and help us deal with what we're currently living in and what we have been living with and what we're concerned? Is that going to help that? Is that going to offset that? Is you thinking that because if I talk about that, that's going to make it feel better? This is not a race call. I'm not calling for race here. I'm just telling you that this is oppressed people that have been constantly in bondage. Even after they've been freed, so-called freed, they've still been in bondage. They're still oppressed. Do you not understand? This is what we're talking about. It's not on a level. It says here that the black experience, it mentioned by a certain rights to depossess people rebel against this social degradation and demand recognition as the full members of society. William explains, for the historical disempowered, the conferring of rights is symbolic of all the denied aspects of their humanity. Rights imply a respect that places one in the referential range of self and others, that elevates one's status from human body to social being. It is not blacks' assertion of their constitutional rights, but America's lack of commitment to these rights that has preserved the oppressive social order. This instrumental fidelity to the Constitution is also subject to criticism from the opposite direction. Scholars dedicated to constitutional interpretation might contend that an instrumental fidelity is not really fidelity at all. It merely exploits the constitutional rhetoric for an ulterior purpose, like a suitor's false profession of love. A second criticism is that equal citizenship is too limited a focus for an approach to the entire Constitution. Although it may help us interpret the Equal Protection Clause, for example, it is useless in figuring the meaning of, say, the Second Amendment. Finally, blacks taking an instrumental approach might be accused of irrational obsession with race. Race is important, but American politics turns on other important issues as well. All of these objections crumble in light of the centrality of black citizenship to the constitutional meaning. And to this day, man, the blacks really don't have any citizenship in terms of first-class citizenship. They don't have that equal footing. And that's what most of our black leaders in the past were really trying to struggle and come up with ways to see that be achieved. Okay? Some believe that by benefiting from the Constitution itself, we need to be included and inclusive in the Constitution in order to utilize the benefits or the privilege of the Constitution. So they argue that, and they struggle for that. And another said, no, this Constitution isn't for you, and the founding fathers never wrote it so that it can be included of you. And it's shown time and time again that they kept re-changing it, readdressing it, reinterpreting it, and you always come on the bad end. I need you to go in there, please. You always come on the bad end of the spectrum. So if that's the case, how can it be for you and how can it benefit you? Others argue from the black leadership. They say, okay, but they all wanted the equality. They all wanted the freedom that God gave them. This was their main focus when they were trying to deal with the plight here of the indigenous people here. They were trying to figure out, how can we equal? How can we get resources economically? How can we get equal treatment economically? Not be redlined, not be sidelined, not be subjected to poverty. How can we get help in social justice? Okay, socially. How can we get help within politically? How can we manage our affairs? How can our votes count? You understand? Votes have power. I don't want you to get it wrong. Voting does have power. But for whom? For whom? You have to analyze that. Because every time the indigenous people vote, when the person becomes in office, what do they really do for the indigenous people or their plight? They have yet, even then, from 1776, man, you do the math, they have yet to truly abolish slavery from the hearts of the people. Truly abolish slavery on every front, in terms of the fact that, no, they are our equal counterparts. Okay? They are no longer second-class citizens. They have to fight, and then you get a president that comes up, and look what they normally do. You got to pay attention to the politics. They normally go to the black neighborhoods, getting the votes of the black people, but never change the outcome of the black people. Never change the outcome of the indigenous people. And I'm only using the term black here because certain terms are legal terms that marginalize people. And that's true in contractual clause. But I'm only using these terms because this is something that we know. And this is something that, just to keep going back and forth for trying to say politically correct, I'm going to use the word black. So don't think that I'm not awoke or aware of certain terms and not being used. I'm just utilizing them for the simple fact of trying to make this smooth and talking about it. And this is something that we all can identify with. Okay? So in terms of dealing with that, you have to look at it. So they come and they parade themselves. And they say, the president tell you, look, vote for me. I'm going to make sure that blacks get treated fairly. I'm going to make sure that your cause and your cries be heard. And this is something that has been parroted. And this is something that has been mimicked. And this is something that has been spread down from every president. Say it's not so. We are in a seat of luxury right now. What president are we on right now? We're on the 45th, 46th. What president are we on right now? We're in a seat of luxury right now to look at history. And we're seeing everything from it. So what change is what I'm trying to get you to see? What really changed? Huh? You tell me. What changed? Oh, they brought your bill up to the, to the Senate. And then now it got to pass these people, the Republicans, then it got to pass these. And then once the House passed it, got to pass this. But do the bill actually get passed? Do it actually get help? You got to honestly start thinking that, man. Sometimes you got to stop. We really have to redirect. We tried the Martin Luther King way. We did, man. It's no disrespect to Martin Luther King. No disrespect for the progress that he pushed forward. Even at the end, it's reported that he written to his wife, that he even made statements that he wished he could have looked at some of the things that Malcolm X was actually saying. Or that if Malcolm was alive, he can point it. He actually witnessed this. Also, he started talking about the economical errors that he made in terms of before. So a lot of these things you have to really look at and weigh it. This is where Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah, one of the things that he do when he refutes the philosophers, one of the things that he does is that he shows you the inconsistencies of those philosophers, in the time periods, how they cannot agree on one thing, how they change up and how they do this. And then he shows you their earlier statements versus their later statements. And he shows you that there were many from among them that have gave it up and abandoned philosophy altogether and say, I never benefited in all these years that I was in it. Those statements are crucial. Those statements right there are crucial because it shows you. Wait, Yui, please. Yes, wait. It shows you the fertility and the falseness of that whole thing. It does. So when you looking at people before us who came before who was staunch on one view, and towards the end of their lives they changed that view, we need to look at that critically as a people. If Martin Luther King changes his stance and became more what they call rational and understanding the need for economical progress amongst the people and not your handout towards the people, we need to critically look at that. We need to see where he was going at. We need to see what he was leading up to that, because if it's about integration, we tried that and we're still getting killed. It's still police brutality. It's still, are you please? That's why I want you to go in there. It's still second-class citizenship. It's still this. We still have these things, and nothing has changed. But we still burn down the city. Go back to 1967, 1992, Rodney King. Go back to all of these different riots that you can see, all right, and see the same thing that you're going to see that happens. And for people to say that bills passed and all of this different stuff, those bills were on suspension and on hold. And when they did get passed, who benefited? Who made it look like the hero? When they passed those bills out, it was made to make like the president that was in office, or the person, or the Senate, whoever, the senator, whoever pushed it, was seeing that they got the recommendation or everything like that. They was all for that movement. That's why you got to call a spade a spade. I'm trying to hurry up and move real fast. She mentioned some real good points from Frederick Douglass. All right. So Justice Brennan put it, the court's fear of too much justice. So this is what they did. So when they had the Constitution and they was changing and making amendments or slight adjustments to it, some of the people that was the legislature, it was like, no, we can't give them too much justice. Now pay attention to this. You ever heard of this before? Does this even make any sense? Too much justice. Does that make sense? I mean, honestly, does that make sense? Is it a such thing of too much justice? I'm stuck. It's justice and it's injustice. But is there such thing of too much justice? Think about that. These are the words that they use. These were the arguments that they used. Why they didn't include these people. Why they didn't include the indigenous people. Hold up. Too much justice. Hold on. All right. No, son. Justice is when you give people their rights. All right, uphold their rights and give them what's fair to them, equally distributed. Okay, so this term here they didn't do. So privileged racist status gives whites a powerful incentive to construe. Okay, Yubi, please wait. All right, come here. All right. Okay, love you. All right, privileged racist status gives whites a powerful incentive to construe other constitutional provisions in a way that leave the existing social order intact. Many white Americans view a broad range of reforms as contrary to their self-interest because they perceive black people's social position to be in opposition to their own. Under American racist ideology, constitutional interpretations that will benefit blacks are anti-ethical to whites' interests because black social advancement diminishes white superiority. Derrick Bell has argued that whites, they just bring in different people. Yeah, they bring in different people's views. It's not saying my view enough, and I just want you to hear what they're saying. Just be a little bit objective here. Wait, Yubi. Derrick Bell has argued that whites in America, even those who lack wealth and power, believe that they gain from continuing economic disparities that leave blacks at the bottom. Thus, racism helps to explain the prevailing understanding of the Constitution that disregards poverty. Black activists have claimed that their instrumental approach is more, not less, faithful to the Constitution. As he sat in the Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. predicted one day the South would know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best. They was in reality standing for what is best in the American dream and for the most sacred values of our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in their formulation of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. All right, Yubi, let me finish this real quick. Yes, I'm gonna give it to you. Let me finish this. Number 2, why is fidelity to the Constitution? Why would blacks do it? She says racial disparities and cognitive dissonance. All right. This instrumental approach does not shelter blacks from an ill effects of fidelity to an evil constitution. Balkin is right that to pledge fidelity to something and simultaneously believe it to be riddled with evil produces serious cognitive dissonance. So it's like, I won't call it an oxymoron, but it is like kind of crazy, right? Here you're saying that the Constitution is evil, but at the same time you are upholding it. You are swearing a loyalty to it. So it's a seeming contradiction. Is what Balkin is trying to argue. It's like, how can you hold on to something that you say that is evil, right? So, as in so many aspects of American life, however, there are racial differences in our psychosis. For whites, cognitive dissonance may be a fancy term for guilt. For black, it may be a fancy term for despair. All right? A, marginalizing injustice. The chief psychosis that Balkin attributes to constitutional fidelity afflicts white people far more than blacks. Balkin worries that our fidelity to the Constitution requires us to believe that it is basically good and a just document, and that it frames the legal system of a basically good and just policy. The worst symptom of this constitutional idolatry is the tendency to see injustice as marginal or exceptional to the political scheme. I think that black folks' experience of oppression makes them pretty much immune to this particular element. Being the brunt of the bulk of constitutional evil at least affords what James Baldwin called the American Negro's great advantage of having never believed in the collection of myths to which white Americans clinch to. Blacks do not write off injustice as less monumental than slavery. Rather, they tend to view contemporary racist practices as perpetuation of slavery's evil, a practice many white people find as annoying as black finds white belief in American virtue. All right, these James Baldwin was very prolific and very well spoken, right? But these were the people that came before us, and they were here and they dealt with some of this stuff. So we have to analyze and look at what they laid down for us, in terms of what they were dealing with. Because there were other people that preceded them, and they went back and looked at those scholars or those thinkers that were dealing with this type of this constitutional evil that was actually being constructed against a group of people, and they looked at and seen the solutions from there. So they built off of that, and so we have to do the same thing. So when we sit here, instead of keep crying and pouting and having these emotional outbreaks, that really equates to a lack of intelligence. Because if you got for example, a demonstration with no leader, if you got a protesting with no leader, no real objective, no organizational structure, no demands that can actually be put down, the only thing that you're shouting out is that you saying you want justice, which can have been done just on social media alone. The social media outpour was enough even before you went on the streets, that it demanded, because the video was recorded and people were speaking up just on social media alone, that had Minneapolis and the law enforcement there like, oh, we got to do something. We can't just overlook this or throw this under the rug. So that was pretty much done. And even the fact of having people contact the governor there, or contact the mayor there, or contact the president, or these steps that can actually be taken to really bring about some type of change, as opposed to standing and shouting in front of the arm of the law. How I'm going to go shout in front of the police who doesn't have a right to pass any laws? I mean, you do got to understand that. The police doesn't have a right to pass one law. But I'm going to go shout in front of them, and I feel proud at the end of the day because I really did something. What did you do? Tomorrow, the same system... Hold on. Yeah. Because it probably need batteries. The same system, institutionalized racism system, is still in play. So you just let off what steam? So basically, what did you do? This is why you have to analyze what those masheikhs, kibar at that, are telling you why protesting doesn't lead to nothing. And this is why I find it misleading and misdirecting when our students put out positions that they know is weak, that they know is not strong, and saying that protesting and demonstration is permissible. And saying those things, you have to show why those things aren't. Because there's many scholars who show you, and the strongest evidence is laid out in the Quran. Fir'aun, period. They never protest against Fir'aun. No sitting demonstrations, no nothing. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never prostrated before the event of Islam and afterwards. The companions never protested, never demonstrated before the event or afterwards. The tabi'een, the atba'u tabi'een, dealing with the different things they had to deal with, never set forth for protesting. The scholars who recorded, placed in the books of fiqh, the books of hadith, they never placed one chapter or hadith that the Prophet ﷺ talked about it. But guess what chapter they did place? Guess what hadith they did mention? Those are hadiths from the Prophet ﷺ about obeying and respecting the ruler. That's there. But we don't have one bab on muzaharat. That says something. That's profound. How can you overlook that? How can you say that an odd position that is based off of ijtihadi, which it is, which you're going to find a scholar who's saying maybe we can pull from this verse the fact that it is permissible in some form or way that you can do protesting. Or maybe you can pull from this hadith that is permissible in some way. But when you analyze it from other scholars, they look at that same evidence and they say, there's no way you can pull that out. It's not there. There's no way. So for you to give one side and try to paint this side, which is the weakest of the side, it's not from a good presentation of a student. If you're going to give those views, then give the views fully. Like Sheikh Al-Albani will always do. Give the sides. When you read any book of fiqh, especially when you get past just the beginning fiqh, when you read any book of fiqh, like we did Bulugh al-Maram, alhamdulillah, on the Kitab al-Fasting. And for those who did it with us for the month of Ramadan, alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you. But how many different opinions did we go over? Constantly we was going over different opinions, right? Then Sheikh Fawzan would bring his Qawl al-Rajih based off of his belief and following the earlier scholars and what they assessed from the situation. He would come in and say, well, yeah, this would be closer to the haqq. But how many different views would he bring in these issues? How many different views? Multiple of them. So presenting those issues to the people is allowing people to see what has substance and what doesn't. What is the actual right and what's not. Because what you're doing in turn is you're firing up our youth to release their frustration. Hold on. Okay, Yubi. I gotta fix it. To release their frustration in the incorrect manner. You got the youth wound up and they're releasing their frustration not through the proper channels. You ever notice that? Here it is, you're burning down stores, looting, and I know a lot of people, there was a lot of agent provocateurs that was out there. There were a lot of people that weren't from the actual respective towns. We know that. And there was a lot of people that were burning stuff down that, you know, for the sake that wasn't all people. But at the very least, the youth out there trying to do what they're doing, breaking down these things. But you ever notice something? They didn't target towards the actual corporates in George Floyd's death. They didn't say, well, this outrage is against the law system. You ever notice that? They never said we're going to go stand. Even if you did what Malcolm did, even though I'm not even in support of that, because that might be a form of a demonstration. Even if you say I'm going to take an organization, a group of men, to stand in front of the police station until justice is served. Even if I'm going to do that, even if I'm going to constantly bombard you with calls, letters, petitions, whatever, to make you understand that we mean business. Not standing in front of a cop face trying to show you I'm going to take the knee and I'm going to do this, this, and that, and this is going to bring about change. It didn't work for our leaders. It didn't work for them. We're in a seat of privilege. We've seen that it haven't worked. Why are we not going to use our sense? That's not the way that we should be telling our youth. We should be telling our youth, if you really want to bring about change and a system that's going to take a lot of different things, you have to, one, educate yourself. Oh, youth, educate yourself. You're going to have to go back to the past and look at those scholars from amongst us. Okay? Those scholars that are from amongst us that dealt with this issue, that even tried to pull over, that have some academic, that have some research background, that dealt with these people head on in this institutional regime, and look at some of the solutions and the things that they were laying down, and see how you can either add to it. Because if you're educated and you have knowledge, then you can move in a certain manner that will bring about change or enforce change. You can't do that if you're just speaking from emotions. Yes, please. Wait, I'm going to get it. You can't speak from emotions or position of motions. I give them to you. You got to go in there, okay? That's the deal, okay? So I can just finish, all right? Yes? Yes? All right, that's our deal. F1. Honey. Go in there. All right? Shut the door. I know, I'm almost done. Shut the door, please.
I need the door open like this.
Yes, thank you. All right, F1. Yes. All right, so if you look at it, I'm getting ready to finish. Frederick Douglass, he says something here that I want to read, because he mentioned something about why he used the Constitution. All right, so Frederick Douglass, his idealism was one melody, Balkan diagnosis in a black man is delusion, the misguided faith and ideal constitution that does not really exist. Balkan criticized Frederick Douglass for being off the wall because Douglass claimed that the Constitution prohibited slavery at a time when no judge even questioned slavery's constitutional status. Douglass is the type of idealist who offers theories of interpretation that produce a shadow constitution that remedies the positive law of the Constitution of existing defects. This is Balkan statement about Frederick Douglass, okay? Certainly Douglass was well aware of the effects of the positive law of slavery. He himself grew up in chains. He was a slave himself, all right? So this is Dorothy, the person who put together this article. She's speaking and showing you that Douglass was actually aware of this. He was no stereotype romantic. He came to his position on the Constitution after years of careful consideration and political advocacy. Douglass initially adhered to the Garrisonian rejection of the Constitution as a slave-holding document. In 1849, he wrote, "The original intent and meaning of the Constitution, the one given to it by the men who framed it, those who adopted it, and the one given to it by the Supreme Court of the United States, make as a pro-slavery instrument which I cannot bring myself to vote under or swear to support." All right? Douglass argued that the garrisoning position...
One day, Daddy, yesterday...
let me finish this. Go ahead.
Yesterday you playing right there. You were helping me those Legos yesterday.
Yes. Okay. So you gotta wait. Yeah, wait till I'm finished, then I can help you. Okay. All right. So he says Douglass argued that the garrison position in the debate in Syracuse, New York, in 1850, proclaiming that the framers attempted to unite liberty and holy wedlock with the dead bodies of slavery, and the whole was tainted. Let this unholy and righteousness union be dissolved. What led Douglass to reverse his stance on the Constitution? In his autobiography, Douglass described the change in his views after he left New England for Rochester, New York, to publish his paper, The North Star, lectured against slavery and concealed fugitive slaves in the Underground Railroad. So he came to change his position. All right. First, he was advocating for behalf of the Constitution as being a legal document that wasn't about enslaving or bringing people to enslave, but he later on changed his position to that. He says, by such a course of thought and reading, I was conducted to the conclusion that the Constitution of the United States, inaugurated to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, cannot well have been designed at the same time to maintain and perpetuate a system of rapine and murder like slavery, especially as not one word can be found in the Constitution to authorize such a belief. I'm not done yet. Please, Jimmy. Please let me get finished. Yeah. Okay. Please let me finish this. All right. So we got Douglass. All right. So we finished Douglass. I want to bring somebody else. I got to go past this a little bit. I'm almost at the end. All right. We're going to bring up W.D. Du Bois. Okay. Yeah. I do not see Douglass' Constitution constitutional idealism as skirting the problem or constitutional evil of assuaging the cognitive dissonance produced by fidelity to the Constitution and a world of injustice. All right? It was a way of exposing the nation's sins and demanding that the nation's repentance. Okay, I see that you be pleased. Please, we had a deal. Right, go in there. Let me finish. I want to get finished. Thank you. Yes, let me finish. All right, let me finish. So, he says, I do not. He says, Douglass, on the other hand, said, faith in blacks unite. Okay, yeah. Constitution story itself believed that the conflict between the Constitution and social justice would be resolved eventually. Douglass, on the other hand, had faith in blacks' ultimate liberation and followed a strategy of fidelity to constitutional ideas to achieve this end. Douglass' fidelity required denying whites the right to hold slaves altogether under the Constitution. So Douglass was fighting too. So his way of fighting was saying, okay, all right, I know that this Constitution framed by the Founding Fathers wasn't for pretty much the indigenous people or the native blacks here. But we shouldn't disregard it altogether. We should hold them together and expose their hypocrisy. That here you're saying in this document that y'all say is so sacred and so just from the Founding Fathers, when why are y'all not abiding by it? All right? Why are y'all not holding on to it? Why are y'all not, utilizing it to the full extent? Okay? And why is it not extending beyond your class of people, beyond your people? Why isn't it? And I want you to realize and pitch and conceptualize something in your mind. Brothers and sisters, the Constitution has been suspended for how long? The Constitution has been suspended for how long? Think about it. The Constitution, even that they uphold to right now, is still the same that when Douglass was alive. And what I mean by the same, I'm not saying that it hasn't been amended or adjusted since he's been around, but the fact that nothing has really changed from the mindset of those people who actually feel as though themselves are privileged and entitled and that they possess or keep one class of people down. That haven't changed. Do you not see? So when you're dealing with something like this, where you have the intelligent mind, like Douglass, because he was very intelligent, where you have inquisitive minds, you have militant minds, you have different individuals from different personalities, from these black thinkers and leaders who actually try to go up against this regime, that there still was met with the same opposition, or even some worse than others. So you have to see, how can we deal with this? What can be a definitive way of dealing with this? Should we stop now? And should we not deal with this? Now that, it's been moved from third degree to murder to second degree to murder, is that the real issue? Should we now no longer worry about that? Should we just say, okay, let's get back to, regular life? Let's just see how it look with the COVID-19. Let's just see how it look. Well, us getting our jobs back. Should we do this or should we do that? What should we actually do? You understand? So these are the questions that people are posing right now. And people are bombarding a lot of people with questions. What should be our direction here? How should we move? How should we this? You're not going to get that answer if you don't go back and look at those who already came before you. They already set and laid down some good systems that you maybe can get behind. And I think that the Muslims are in a very special, unique place right now. All right? In terms of, we already are commanded by the book and the sunnah to champion the cause of the oppressed. We have been commanded by the book and the sunnah. There's ayats at the hadith. I can do a whole video just on the ayats and hadiths alone, on the fact of standing up in face of and in spite of injustice. We have been commanded for that. So we should be championing that cause. In terms of that, yes, it's going to require us to work with people outside of our faith. This is not going to be done just a bunch of Muslims getting together and saying, okay, yeah, we got this and we're going to handle this. No, it's too bigger than that. So it's going to take something that, and this is what, our brother Malik actually saw. My uncle seen that he had to work with others outside of that natural thing, but he had a different philosophy. Not saying that his philosophy is the best, but this is what you're going to have to do to get to that. Let's talk about some real live solutions. You understand? And I want you to get something clear in your mind. The way that they've been doing with these Jim Crows and these certain type of ideology and philosophical things they've been working with years. You don't understand that they're working with manuals. You understand? A code, a set of codes, ethics that they abide by, that they use to conquer and divide people socially, economically, politically, you understand? Psychologically, spiritually, mental, what level you want to look at it. divide and conquer. They have created something that you pretty have never saw before, where the people who are oppressed really second guess themselves. The people who are oppressed are internalized, have hatred of themselves, and they don't even know it. On a subliminal level, they really don't big themselves up. They really don't understand the uniqueness that they have. They don't. This is why our people had to address these issues. This is why I had to build the self-esteem of the indigenous people, because you've been oppressed for so long. You're like, yo, either I'm going to submit to it, and I'm going to feel like I'm inferior because this is my plight and there's nothing going to change. And what did that do to you psychologically? What type of trauma do that bring about you? You feel subdued, you feel overwhelmed, you feel overpowered, right? So you start to think and second guess that, yeah, maybe I am just a sellout. Maybe I am this thing. I can never be better than the dominant race. No. Maybe I can never be better than the dominant race. I'm almost, Yubi. Maybe I can never be better than the dominant race. So you have to look at that. And then the other side is, no, maybe we need to, what do we have to do? We should never stop struggling. We should continue to struggle until we gain that freedom. So these were the two clashes that you've seen from amongst a lot of our leaders. I know I got to stop because, I got Yubi as a beast right now. My Lord Wardy. But inshallah ta'ala, but maybe next time I do a part 2 to this where I can finish this article. Because at the end of this article, it brings a lot of things to a head that was sticking with a lot of the leaders and the stuff that they were talking with and what they were dealing with. Because even at the end, you had people saying that no, that they don't see no end to racism. They don't see no end to the white supremacy. They don't see no end to the institutionalized racism. They don't see no benefit gained from integrating. They don't see none of these things. These are the things that they talked about a little bit later. That's why they started to go against. I'm gonna get here to one of them right now. Professor Bell, he's one of them who. Now listen to Professor Bell. This is how he understands it. He said, contemporary example of a black person grappling with the trauma of constitutional fidelity is Professor Derrick Bell.
Wait a second. I want to put this behind you.
Are you okay? Wait, Yubi, please.
Okay.
Okay. Professional Bell's writing, some of the most piercing critiques of constitutional evil of our time have become increasingly pessimistic about the chances for racial justice in America. Bell points to whites' persistent refusal to abdicate their racial domination while repeatedly sacrificing black people's rights, despite decades devoted to civil rights protests and litigation based on constitutional fidelity. Hold on, UB. The economic and political condition of the majority of blacks has worsened. Bell's observation echoes Malcolm X's warning 30 years ago that blacks were wasting their time appealing to the moral conscience of a bankrupt man like Uncle Sam. So this is his outlook now. This is not even Malcolm X. But it resembles some of what Malcolm X was already preaching, right? So I just want you to see that not all of the black leaders had the same mindset of how to deal with this regime. Some was like, look, like Bell, Malcolm X noted that white Americans would not eliminate the evil of racism because it is evil. Rather, they eliminate it only when it threatens their existence. So these men, they was on the opposite side. They kept saying the nonviolence approach. Now, I don't want you to misconstrue this. When we say nonviolence versus, we're not saying violent approach. That's what people say. So if you say a nonviolent approach, you automatically talk about a violent approach, right? Islam don't condone you just going to go knock someone upside the head. Okay, armed liberation has been done throughout history. All right, revolution has been done throughout history. It's a part of human history. It's a part of human actually social structure. It's a part of that. All right, whenever injustice is done, outrages happen, revolts happen. But there are things that actually have to happen when those things take place. Can you please let me finish this, Ayu? Please, thank you. Those things have to be laid out to understand it, because what they tell you is that whoever wasn't for the nonviolent approach, they were for a violent approach, and that's not necessarily true. You understand? Now, Malcolm and here with Derrick Bell, they actually are similar here. They're saying that, okay, you got to protect yourself. If the law, which you keep trying to integrate yourself into, is not acknowledging you, that it's not protecting you, and it's not for you, and that they don't consider your life above chattel or property, and that they are not going to ride for back for you, then what leaves you to do is to what? Protect yourself. the man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, Ya Rasulullah, what if someone come to me and try to take my property, really try to rob me, take something from me? Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you fight him. He said, so Ya Rasulullah, what is in the midst of this fight? This guy kills me, he overcomes me and he kills me. He said, but then you die as a shaheed. He said, so what if I fight him and I overcome him? You understand what I'm saying? So you have to pay attention to this. Defending yourself is a God-given right. That's the point I'm trying to make. Defending yourself is a God-given right. And whenever your oppressor is telling you that you cannot defend yourself, that you cannot, when the law fails to defend you, this is what Malcolm was actually saying. So when you got a God-given right being trumped, are you, please give me time. Give me time, please. When you got a God-given right, right? Thank you. When you got a God-given right being trumped by a political right, something isn't right. That's where the outcry and the outrage is. So Malcolm is saying, and Derrick Bell is saying, no, what are you doing? Why you keep going to them and keep acknowledging that you must go to them and be included amongst them in order for you to acknowledge some right? Then you are giving them the mindset that they are superior. You're giving them the understanding that they are dominant. You are acknowledging this. That's what their argument is. The others are saying, no, we got to achieve this in a peaceful way. Islam always laid down that you fight only when necessary. Allah Jalla wa'ala mentioned this in the Quran. You fight when necessary. You fight when you are equipped, when you have the actual strength in order to do it. And you know, the organizational strength. It's what Islam is actually saying. You fight. All right, you fight for oppressors, you fight for this. If you don't have the strength, then there comes a time when you're going to have to use hikmah and lay down your arms. Where you cannot beat the oppressor, or you cannot beat this, or you cannot fight at that time. This is all discussed in Quran. I don't think you read the ayahs of jihad. You have to really read those verses. Go back to tafsir, read them. Why do you think Allah was laying them down? Like, you got to understand what was going on here. After the Muslim state was laid, Allah Jalla wa'ala says, وَقَاتِلُوهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةً وَيَكُونُ الدِّينَ لِلَّهِ. I mean, do you not understand that? فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ. These ayahs in Surah Baqarah, Allah make it clear. Allah says, and fight them until there's no more fitna. Fight them until there's no more fitna. Many of the scholars of tafsir, they said that, you know, in terms of the fitna, until there's no more shirk, or till there's no more, you know, kufr, there's no more bid'ah, etc., etc. Many of them use different statements to explain what the fitna here meant in this particular context. Earlier on, Allah Jalla wa'ala mentioned in another verse, on that same page in Surah Baqarah, Allah mentioned how fitna ashatu min al-qatl, and the scholars of the Mufassirin, they say that fitna here is talking about oppression. It's worse than slaughter. It's worse than murder. Allah mentioned that twice in Surah Baqarah, that, you know, oppression is worse than that. So we got to really start looking at certain things and see what the argument was on both sides, and not think that somebody is just trying to be radical and say, okay, let's just go out there and just start banging white people in the head. Come on, man. Nobody's saying that, man. Nobody is saying that. So don't believe what the media is telling you, that people are being radical. But you have to defend yourself. And if you see that nonviolent approaches for years have not even worked and haven't changed and did one thing and keep trying to gain acceptance, then you have to look the other way sometimes. Meaning that you have to look and see what the other ones have said. Try to employ some of those methods. See if they work. But for the Muslims, we need to look at those methods and see if they're close to what Allah said and what His Messenger said. And when we weigh that towards that, you can find out and see what you're supposed to be doing. Allah Jalla wa'ala commands the Muslims to fight. There are times when He does.
What is this?
Okay, Yubi, wait.
It's
Yeah, wait, Yubi, please. You know, He commands the Muslims to fight. Last but not least, Bell, you see that he actually said that. And in blacks' despairs, it is not because they were deluded into thinking that white people meant for the Constitution to include them, or that the injustice they experienced were aberrational, or that interpretations of the Constitution alone can overcome racism. Rather, it stems from the realization that the strategy of constitutional fidelity will fail to make blacks full citizens because white supremacy is too powerful of a force to vanquish. This despair is not the same thing as finding out that God we worship is actually a demon. All right? For blacks are well aware that American justice has been more wicked than divine. It is more like a prisoner discovering that the route he painstakingly shoved out to escape his unjust confinement leads back to the wretched cell it fled. In other words, you was building this, you was digging so long, and you're like, yeah, I'm getting ready to escape this joint, I'm out. Right? And then you finally get to escape, but only get recaptured or you come out only to be re-put back into the same confinements that you were already in, the same injustice things that you were already in. And that's the crux of the matter. And that's what we see from our founding fathers. I mean, not founding like these founding fathers, but from our scholars, from the blacks. And there's way more stuff that I didn't cover, that this article couldn't cover, that there are many other blacks, thinkers and leaders who have contributed politically to the indigenous people, who contributed socially, economically to the indigenous people here in the West, that I think that we owe them at least the respect enough to analyze some of the things that they have done, and not to exclude them because they were not Muslims. Do not exclude them because they weren't Muslims. I don't think that we should do that. I think that would be injustice, and it would be a form of not properly respecting knowledge to exclude them because they weren't Muslims. And last but not least, my advice is to all students of knowledge. We have to understand that having Islamic information is one thing. Having secular information is another. But coupling between the both is very important. And that in this time that we in, we need to learn how to really put our differences aside and work together. Not because so-and-so is prestigious in your eye. Not because so-and-so is from this particular jamia or this particular group of people, or he agrees with your every word or every statement. But the fact that you can come together as a body that represent an organizational structure laid down from the works of our earlier predecessors, and fusing Islamic tenets and principles within it to set down a definitive guideline and champion the cause of the oppressed, so that we can educate our youth instead of them going out and actually have to protest. They can learn how to really properly do something to cause some damage. Buying property is one way, but buying property is not the answer. Okay, buying property isn't the answer alone by itself. We can buy up a block, but that don't mean that the people that be, or the powers that be, cannot take that block. Henceforth, that's why they divide and conquer when they did what they did to Black Wall Street. We sing the praises of Black Wall Street. We talk about Black Wall Street. But why isn't another Black Wall Street? Why isn't another Black Wall Street? Think about it. Whenever you want to make an example of something, or you want to show people time and time again, every time you build something, I'm going to destroy it. It makes you say, okay, it's not even going to be, they're going to come and do nothing but destroy it again. So we need to have what they call self-determination. We got to realize that. Self-determination. We are a nation without a state. Do you understand what that means? You are a nation. Native Americans, okay? Native Indigenous Americans, right? Of color people here in the West. You don't have a country. Do you not understand that? You don't have a country that you can go back to. It's not there. You don't have whatever you think you have. You don't have a state. So if you don't have these things, you have to come up with formulating, and this is what we got from our earlier predecessors, the scholars that I'm quoting from now. You got to come up with something that's an organized structure, unit that brings about stability to your kind and to your people. And this doesn't make you a nationalist. This doesn't make you a racist. This doesn't make you prejudiced. It doesn't make you a person who don't want to work with other groups. No, you want to work with other groups. We encourage other groups to help us in this endeavor. You see the oppressed people being downtrodden and being put out, then fight. For those people who are benefiting from the privilege, then fight back on your way against this regime. Okay? And for those people who are not, then fight. Join us with that fight. Help us establish ourselves politically, socially, economically. Let us get to this level spiritually. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that we can form up a unit that can bring about change. And it has been laid down in these guidelines. This is discussion I think that we really should be having. And the students of knowledge, if you can put your difference to the side, meet up together. We see the virus doesn't do nothing with COVID-19, so you can stop the... Okay, Juby, I'm about to be done. I'm trying to close. Let me wrap this up. So, you know that...
I'll wrap you up.
Okay, you'll wrap me up. So at the end of the day, please, brothers, if you got respective imams or respective students, instead of you trying to pin us together, instead of you trying to say that Abu Zayd said something in his talk. Okay, brothers mean like someone like you got a brother and sister. Don't you got a brother? Okay, yeah, like that. Right? So Instead of trying to pin each other. Oh yeah, I was on Abu Zayd live. I was on Isa Abu Isa live. I was on Imam Muslim Family Center live. I was on Mufti live. I was on this live. I heard him say this. And then you go back and try to pose a question to the other brothers. And then that stuff got to stop. Because that stuff is bringing about divisions. And it makes people seem as if we're at odds with one another when we might don't see eye to eye, but we're not really at odds with one another. Okay, and then we're really not at odds at one another. Okay, so that stuff have to stop. Instead of you telling your respective imams, why don't you contact so and so? I did listen to what he had to say. He brought some legitimate points. It was some valid points. How can we get y'all in the room together? How can we get y'all to sit down? How can we get y'all to actually put something together? How can we become a vocal voice without the form of protesting, without the form of demonstrations, but in a way that is used with wisdom? Allah Jalla wa Ala sends to the people that they don't have a book of enlightenment, no guidance from Allah, and no book of enlightenment, no guidance from Allah, and no instructions. So you have to have some type of guidance or leadership or direction. How can we do this? So instead of you going back from one and playing one student against another, bring them together. And they should be doing this anyway. Contributing to your community. Sitting with one another. Stop looking at a person with a raisin head because you think that he is not so eloquently put. I know I'm not well spoken. I'm not well articulated. It doesn't matter. What matters is we have a problem on our hands. And it's been on our hands. And unfortunately now the George Floyd make us look at it again even more. Just like over the years. But we should still always be outraged. You understand? We should always be outraged. We should never stop. And that's what I wanted to bring, inshallah ta'ala. Whatever I said that was incorrect in my ad-libbing or anything that I said that can be misconstrued was from myself and the shaitan. Whatever I said was correct is from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Like I said again, like Malcolm X said, my sincerity is my credentials. I just want to see us really bring about some positive changes and really deal with what's in front of us and not be colorblind. There's no such thing of colorblind. Okay? Not be colorblind. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallahu khairan.